Hello everyone and welcome to the first official video on my channel. So this first video is going to be very basic and quite quick, but all we're going to be doing is setting up a Laravel 9 project using Docker and WSL. Docker takes a lot of the legwork off of us because we no longer need to install things like Composer or npm or XAMPP locally to serve our applications. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing you want to do is download Docker Desktop. I have already installed Docker Desktop for the purpose of this tutorial, however, it will take up to 10 minutes for you to install. Once installed and open, Docker Desktop will then prompt you to install the Linux kernel update package. It will point you to this link on the Microsoft documentation. So download that and then restart Docker. Once that is done, we're ready to start installing WSL on our machine. So to start with that, we want to open a administrator PowerShell. That was a bit loud, so my apologies. But yes, we want to open a Windows PowerShell in administrator. We then want to do the WSL install command. For me, I've already got WSL installed, so it's not going to install. However, it may take a few minutes for you to install it if you haven't already got it installed. After this, we're now ready to install our first distro. So to see all the available distros, all we need to run is WSL list online. And this shows us all the available distros for us to install. I'm going to go for the Ubuntu 20.04. So to install that, we then run WSL install D and then the distro name. In this case, Ubuntu 20.04. Again, I've previously installed Ubuntu but deregistered it. So it's not going to go through the entire installation process. This process on the PowerShell can again take up to 5 minutes for you to install. Once it's installed, it will then launch Ubuntu, which it's doing here for me, and then proceed to install the Ubuntu LTS. Once installed, it's then going to prompt me, when it wants to, a username and password for you to use for your Ubuntu LTS. I will then now come back when that is installed. Now it's prompting me to enter a username. I'm going to go ahead and use my name. It will then prompt me for a password. There we go. And that's it. We've got Ubuntu LTS installed on our machine using Windows Subsystem. So if you've never installed Windows Subsystem or a distro before, more than likely your WSL distro version is 1. I know mine will be as well. So what we then need to do is change the version of WSL for the particular distro. So to do that, we use WSL set version, the distro name, and then 2. This will convert our distro to WSL2. And again, this process can take a few minutes to do. So I'll come back once that is converted. And I'm back. So now we've converted our WSL distro into WSL2. So then what we want to then do is go into Docker. At the minute, our Ubuntu command line won't have any access to Docker. So what we need to do is go into our Docker settings. We need to make sure we've got the WSL2 based engine ticked, and we need to enable integration with my default WSL distro. Then we need to check our Ubuntu LTS, apply and restart. Sometimes Docker doesn't restart automatically when you click that button, and I'm not quite sure why. So what you can then do is force Docker to quit and reload it manually. This will then give our Ubuntu command line access to Docker. So now I'll reload Docker. And it should kick back up. There we go. So now we're in a position to start the Ubuntu command line. What we then want to do, and this is personal preference, I normally create a directory called code, and I use this to store all my code projects. If you're a freelancer, you then may create a folder within code freelance. So we're now ready to get our Laravel application set up. So we're going to copy this curl command from the Laravel documentation. We're going to paste that in, and it's going to download the latest Laravel sale PHP 8.1 composer image. If you've already got that image locally, it will just proceed to set up the Laravel application. So if you're setting up a separate Laravel application in the future, it won't do this part and it will actually be much faster. So whilst it sets up the application, I'm going to pause here and jump back in. And I'm back. So I've got the application set up. It will prompt you for your password to your Ubuntu LTS to complete the installation. And as you can see, it's downloading all the Composer packages as well. So the way to think of it is, it's a different way of doing Composer create-project. So now we've got our application set up, we can now go into that folder. And to kickstart our application, serve it, so we can access it locally, we want to go vendor bin sale up. And what this is now going to do is download all the relevant images to kickstart our server. If you don't configure sale when you're first setting up the project, it will do a default 6 services on your project. What I mean by this is if we jump into the Laravel documentation, there's a section for choosing your sales services. So for example, if we wanted to use PostgreSQL or MariaDB instead of MySQL, we can change that with the with parameter on the curl command. And again, this is all personal preference, but by default I allow it to set up all 6 services, or the default services as such. And it also tells you you can instruct it to create a dev container if that is something you are doing as well. It may take up to 10 minutes to get all the images pulled and your first initial start of the server. However, rest assured, if you then stop the server and restart it, you don't need to worry about this process again. You will already have the images within your Docker, so it won't need to re-download them. And to see that, if you go into Docker, you should now see in the Images tab all the images that's been downloaded. These are obviously the ones that I've downloaded so far, as it's still running. However, you can see them there as they're getting downloaded. If you do end up deleting or removing an image from your Docker setup, when you restart the server, it will re-download it. Eventually, once the server has started, we will see our server or our container within the Containers tab. And within our container, we should then see the 6 services all started individually. However, I will show that to you once mine is set up. It can take up to 10 minutes, as I've already mentioned, so I will cut the video here and I'll jump back in once mine is done. So the server has started and you can see all our different services in different colours getting started up, including the main application. If we stop the server and then proceed to restart the server, you will see that it doesn't take as long as the initial launch of the server. So that's all kickstarted for us, and we should now be able to access this locally as if we were using something like PHP Artisan Serve. Going on to my previous point as well, in Docker you should now be able to see your example app container. You'll be able to see that it's running and how many services are running out of the total count of services, and you can break it down and have a look at all the different services. So in this case we've got a MySQL service running, a MileSearch service running, Redis, MailHog, Selenium, and the main website service. If we jump into our internet browser and go to 1.127.0.0.1:82, there we have it, a freshly installed Laravel project using WSL and Docker. So from this point, it's like a normal Laravel setup. You can proceed to code your web application as if you were serving it through something like XAMPP. To access the database, you would access it again as you normally would through something like Navicat, IDSQL, and what you would then do is use the login or connection credentials as the credentials in your .env file. So what I mean by that is the username for the connection would be sale and the password would be password in this instance. Obviously you'd want to change those credentials. That will also allow us to have multiple local connections if we had various containers or applications running at the same time. Again, this is jumping into a bit more of the Docker configuration, and it's something I definitely recommend reading into because Docker is very extensive and it's something I am only just learning to use as well. As someone who's been developing over 7 years, I've been using the traditional way of Composer, Create Project and using XAMPP. As you can clearly see on my taskbar, I've still got XAMPP set up, and that's because that is what I'm most familiar with. However, it's always good to adopt new technologies and new methods as they can streamline your development process. One thing I would recommend doing is mapping your Ubuntu distro to a network drive. This will allow you to access the files, folders in your Ubuntu distro through the File Explorer and not through command line. Not everyone is confident through a command line, so this makes it easier in those instances. It definitely is faster. So to do that, you open your File Explorer. Then you want to type //WSL $. That'll take you to the WSL network. We can see the Docker desktop data in this case, but you'll also see your Ubuntu distro. You can right click it and map to a network drive. Once mapped, it will take you directly into that map drive, and this is our Ubuntu distro that we've previously installed. If we go into Home and Matthew folder in this case, you will then see your home folder for your distro. You can then go into the code folder if you've created a code folder and see the new Laravel application that we've set up. And that is how you would access an Ubuntu distro through the File Explorer. Another thing I'd recommend is installing something like Windows Terminal. And if I quickly open Windows Terminal, you'll see straight away it looks different than your traditional command prompt or PowerShell. The reason being, you can have tabs, so we can have multiple PowerShells running side by side in one application window as opposed to 2, 3 or 4. The good thing about Windows Terminal, it also allows you to open an Ubuntu command line or a normal standard command prompt amongst others. So I fully recommend using this because it just makes your life easier, especially because then you don't have 3, 4, 5, however many windows, all with command lines doing different things. Just makes your life a little bit easier. On top of that, I'd recommend setting up a bash alias. And what that is a shortcut as such. So if we stop the server and press up, we can see the command to start a server is .vendor bin sail up. It would be much easier if you could just run sail up, and that's what a bash alias is. It's a shortcut. So I would recommend going away, researching a bit about bash aliases, and set one up. Give it a go. It'll make your life easier when you're doing the server and starting it up and stopping it and starting it. Instead of typing the full sail path, you can go sail up. Another thing that you can do is run the server in detached mode. So as you can see here, we've got all the login of the server. However, you may not want to see that. You may want to be able to close your command line as such, not keep it open. So what you can do is tag on -d. That will run the server in detached mode. And what you will see when it's started is we won't see no log, we won't see no output or anything like that. It will take us back to our example app folder as if we're not running any command. To then stop the server, you can go into the Docker application, go to your container and just stop it, and that will stop your server. That brings the end to our tutorial in setting up the latest Laravel project using Docker and Windows Subsystem. I hope this has been helpful to some people, as Docker and Windows Subsystem is again something I've only just adopted and it's a fairly new concept to myself. I would recommend, as I've already mentioned multiple times, reading up on it all and trialing new stuff. Modify the Docker Compose file, try a different service and see what you can come up with and learn along the way. I feel like the best way to learn these sorts of things is just jumping in and trialing. You can watch all the tutorials in the world, but the best way to learn is digging in and using experience and building experience. If you do have any questions or want to know about Docker or WSL, feel free to give me a shout and I will try my best to help you. And again, this way for setting up a Laravel project isn't necessarily the best way. There's many different ways out there. It's all down to personal preference and how you feel you work best. Just because this is the latest technology doesn't mean it's the best way, or doesn't mean it's a way you have to adopt. Stick with what you're comfortable and learn what you're willing to learn. If you did like this tutorial and it helped in some way, please leave a like, a comment or subscribe. I'm hoping to carry on from this tutorial going forward and starting a full Laravel tutorial series. I've got some great ideas, one that's only recently come to light, and I can't wait to record those for you. So yeah, thank you for watching and please leave a like.